my good old buddy, good pal of mine, PineCreek, also known as Doug. PineCreek, what's going on today?
Oh, not too much. Battling theists every day.
Right, yeah.
Asking questions, getting no answers.
Same old work, I see. Cool. Well, Doug, I know who you are. I'm familiar with your work, but for those of you who have never seen you before, wondering who is this guy and why is he so wrinkly? What's he doing on my stream? You want to give the folks at home a quick introduction to who you are?
Did you just call me wrinkly?
No. Is that what you heard? You misheard. I didn't say that. I said prestigious, wise. I said a lot of good things. I think your hearing's going a little bad.
So you want me to tell people who I am?
Yeah, Doug. Tell the people who you are. I mean, what is PineCreek? What is that channel about? What do you do?
PineCreek channel is basically for my sheer entertainment. It's for me just to have something fun to do. I enjoy talking to Christians mostly, but I have talked to people of other faiths and other beliefs, flat earthers as well. And so I ask questions. I do a little bit of that evil street epistemology. And I ask questions on what people believe and why, and try to be civil and not make it combative or a debate. However, I have no hesitation to ask tough questions and make people squirm once in a while if it's necessary. So that's about it. I've been doing it for, 2 years now? Something like that.
Yeah, I think one of the first times I was ever on like a stream, like as me doing myself, was on your channel, actually. I don't know if you remember that.
I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Aren't I the only reason why you're an atheist today? Isn't it my fault?
No, that's not you. I'm sure you're the reason for other people, for sure. But yeah, that was interesting. I remember that conversation. We talked to a presuppositionalist who obviously presupposed that God was real, and we had that kind of conversation. So yeah, it's been quite a little bit of time since then, and we've met each other on each other's channels for different stuff before, I think, since then. But I'm glad you get to be on here. This will be really, really fun. So we're still waiting on calls from people. So if you haven't checked it out there's a thing. Oh, it's so hard with this camera. It's over there. It's on Doug's side. You can see that phone number. And the lines are open right now. So if you want to call in and talk to us, if you have a belief that you want to examine or for us to examine, or if you want to examine some of our beliefs, go ahead and give us a call.
Hey, who's the producer's name who takes the calls?
Mark. Mark is in the back taking calls right now.
Mark, if a woman named Sally or a man named John from Manitoba, Canada call, don't accept it. That's my parents. Ooh.
So what's up with that? Yeah, let's talk about your background a little bit, because you were
I was born and raised in a log igloo in Manitoba, Canada.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I could be close to my mother. And born and raised into a Mennonite household, which is not Amish, but, it's like very conservative, evangelical, Protestant, Anabaptist. Did that for 15 years. I left home when I was 15, not like these kids nowadays who stay at home till they're 30. Mm-hmm. I was driving a tractor by age 12.
Yeah. So when are you going to tell people like actual facts about your life and just,
Everything I said was true except for the log igloo. But,
okay. Wait, were you you were Mennonite?
Yeah, you didn't know that?
No, I thought you. How did I not know that? Are you lying right now?
No, I'm not lying.
Okay. I didn't know that. Okay, so you were Mennonite. You grew up, but you left home. I remember that part. I remember you leaving home, but what happened after that? I mean, you were still a believer, right?
Oh yeah, I didn't leave Christianity or start the process until I was 35, but because I left home to go up to a private Christian school at age 15, which was like close to 3 hours away from where I grew up. I had the flexibility and the freedom to go to different churches and so forth. And so I mostly went to Mennonite churches until age 18, age 19 through 20. I went to a Pentecostal church, or maybe it was longer than that. And then I went to a seeker-sensitive church for like 3 years maybe. Then I got married and moved to Arizona a couple years after that. And I've been in a Baptist church briefly, Calvary Chapel Church for a couple years. Presbyterian Church was my last stop for like 3 years, 4 years. So I've been in a nice wide variety of evangelical type denominations, and so I got the main gist of what they believe, how they worship, and so forth.
Yeah, you kind of got the buffet plate of Christianity there. Kind of a bunch of different ideas. So what was it that kind of made you get out of it? I mean, it sounds like you kept seeking some church communities wherever you were going. Was this like a one day you just kind of started doubting thing, or was this like a gradual process, or how did that work?
Yeah, I think for most people, especially as you get older, it's a gradual process, both going in and coming out. When I started coming out, that was the days of the Four Horsemen, and like 15 years ago, when Hitchens was in his prime and so forth. And so I would listen to these guys and I would shake my head and say, oh man, poor guys. So like Sam Harris and Christopher Hitchens, they're bright guys, but they're just so deceived. Like, can you imagine how much good a Hitchens could do for the world if only they knew Jesus and loved Jesus? Like, this is kind of like the way I thought. But then I found myself saying to myself, they're making some good points here. Like, I kind of understand why they're thinking that way. And then I stumbled upon the atheist experience. Like, I think they were only 2 or 3 years into the show when I found them. And I found myself agreeing with the hosts way more than the callers. And I thought, this is crazy. This is nuts. Like, and I really started to look at myself from the outsider's point of view and saying, I really want to understand why others don't view the world like I do. And so putting myself in that third person in other people's shoes, and also, I think, science bless you. Also, I think the whole idea of laughing at yourself and not taking yourself so seriously was a huge impact on me. I watched Mr. Deity and some other channels, and even though I was a Christian, I said, "Hey, that's funny," and I laughed. And so I didn't take my beliefs too seriously, or less and less seriously as time went on. And 5 years later, I called myself a deist. I probably lived in deist land for a year or two, and then felt comfortable calling myself an atheist.
Sweet. So, long time coming then. That's really interesting. And you have the show now that you've been doing for the past couple of years. How has that changed over time? Has your approach to talking to people really improved, would you say, or do you think it's kind of been the same, or has it surprised you? What have you learned from kind of doing the show that you do now?
That's a good question, Dan. I probably started off talking to just Joe Blow average Christians early on, and then it moved to more so pastors and apologists who hold themselves out there as, hey, this is kind of what I want to be known for or seen as. And so I've gone from being very, very gentle because I know, especially evangelical Christians, I kind of know where they're coming from. And you got to tiptoe gently, it's like deers in the spotlight of your headlights. You just got to be very careful. I think my show has now changed to being a little more aggressive and a little more forthright with apologists and pastors, because they should be able to handle it. They're used to talking to hundreds of people. If they can't answer tough questions, then who can, really? So I think that's how it's shifted. I've become a little more, I'm still nice. I don't swear on my channel. I'm very considerate in that way. Like, I try not to say things too blasphemous or anything like that. I try to avoid things like what Matt Dillahunty does. I don't do. Like, I don't go into these fallacies and so forth, because I know for most people they just zone out then. I'll just ask questions that can show that fallacy rather than saying, oh, that's an argument for ignorance. You know that, right? Like, I won't say stuff like that.
Yeah, that's something I noticed on your channel, which I really appreciate, whereas you're pretty no-nonsense. You never dive into the, oh, these people are evil, everything they're doing is terrible, it's all lies and bullshit. You're more like, well, let's think about this. That question kind of comes with these assumptions. What do you think about this? What if I were to ask you that, you know? And it's questions that if I was a believer or if I was holding the positions that the people you talk to do, I would want to know the answer to as well. So I think it's pretty awesome, the approach that you do. I remember when I was really watching your stuff, it was right before Christmas time, and I had to go to the Christmas service at my grandparents' place. And you have your show where you talk about sermons like these, where you kind of break down these pastor sermons. And I was thinking, what would Doug have to say about this point here and this point here? I kind of had a little Doug voice in my mind while I was sitting into that. So I think your show so far has been really, really great. I like it a lot.
Well, thanks. I think I've gotten some emails, quite a few emails actually, of Christians contacting me and saying they like that I am willing to change, and that I'm willing to say I don't know. But when they hear me talk to apologists and pastors, it's pretty clear that they're unwilling to say that on a few things. And that's a problem. So if we just call them fence-sitting Christians, it's like they're seeing this and say, well, wait a minute, who's valuing truth more here? That atheist guy who's saying, hey, if I saw this, that would increase my confidence and would change my mind. But the pastor's saying, no, there's nothing that's going to change my mind on this. That impacts them. That impacts the viewer.
Mm-hmm. And you in particular, I mean, a mutual friend of ours has said that your videos in particular influenced her to become an atheist, sort of, kind of changed her mind about her Christian beliefs. Our good friend Rachel. What do you think about that?
I didn't like it at first. She emailed me, I think, very soon after she became an atheist, and told me that my videos had a big impact on her. I of course wasn't the only reason. Unlike you, like I was the only reason why you became an atheist.
Yeah, for sure.
But with her, it was multifaceted. And my initial response was, I don't like this. Like, I don't know who she is. She could have just used me as an excuse or whatever, because someone hurt her in the church, or that, you know, her parents were hypocrites or whatever, and she could have left Christianity for a bad reason. And so I remember contacting my inner circle, my friends, and saying, look, I'm not comfortable with this. I kind of feel responsible in a bad way if she is using me to say that she's an atheist. But then I contacted her, we talked, and I realized that she did have good reasons to leave Christianity. She became unconvinced of the core propositions of Christianity, and I think has a better epistemology now. And so that put my soul at ease.
Well, that's interesting that you really didn't like that, because some people would say that the reason why you're doing what you're doing now is you're trying to convince people of what you believe is true, you know, or your lack of belief. You know, in any case, you're trying to convince people of some sort of position. Do you think that that's the goal of your show? Or, I mean, why do you even do stuff on YouTube if you're not out to change people's minds?
My goal is, I've been pretty clear about it, is to have people question their deeply held beliefs. And I call that questioning doubt, to doubt their deeply held beliefs just a little bit, just a scotch. And I often even just use my fingers to show them, this is what I mean. And so my goal is to, especially to target what I call fundamentalists, highly conservative thinking people who say, no, I am certain, I am 100% confident that this is true, just to give them a little bit of wiggle room, because if they are wrong in their beliefs, they're stuck. they're stuck if they have no way out, no markers in their life that would change their mind. So I want, and same with hard atheists who say there's nothing that would change my mind and that I would become a believer in a supernatural or God concept. If they're just as stubborn as, you know, those Christians who say nothing could change their mind, like I want both the tails of the distribution to come a little in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great answer. I don't think that you have an agenda. I've known you long enough to now where I've seen you actually, when people do talk like they want to maybe come over to the other side, you'll fight against that. You'll be like, no, stay the beliefs that you are. Here, let me help you. I'm referring to a conversation that we had with a pastor friend of ours who said that he was considering atheism, at least in some capacity, and you immediately went on his side. You're like, no, you need to stay in the faith. You need to keep doing what you do. And I have never heard, at least in my short time of doing this kind of thing, another atheist do that with the level of seriousness that you took.
You know why I do that, though?
Tell me why.
Because I understand the seriousness of it and how it impacts one's life, the implications, the consequences. Like deeply held beliefs like this, to make a sudden switch is painful. And we have to be real that there are people out there with very terrible lives. And for them to leave, at least in the short term, could potentially make their lives worse, a lot worse. And I know there's a lot of atheists out there who have lost community, who have lost family because they left Christianity or Mormonism or Islam. And it is painful. And so I want people to take it slow, to really have good reasons for leaving a deeply held belief, and have maybe even some backup support groups ready in case they do.
Mm-hmm. Did you have that support when you were leaving?
No. I'm dead inside. I didn't need it.
Well, you weren't dead yet, right? I mean, you still had Christ in your heart and everything, right?
No,
Somewhat.
Well, see, I was 40s when I really left. And let's see, I think the SC community became a replacement for me. And, but even then, like I've always been the type of guy who is totally willing to have my inner circle extremely small. Like I don't need a whole lot of people. I don't need a big community. I'm a stoic by nature. And so it wasn't as painful for me in that sense. I did lose friends, I think. One of my close friends where I live, when he found out, that the first thing he said to me was, "You realize you're going to put your children at risk of going to hell." That was his first statement. And even though a lot of Christians won't go there, there's still a lot of Christians who do. Like that's in their mind. Like this is the core reason why one should accept the gospel, because there's this eternal consequence of damnation that's really, really bad. And this is bubbling in the back of their head. And so it's really tough. And there's still probably atheists today who still fear hell a little bit because of the way they were raised for like decades. And now, it's like, well, but what if it's true? It's like, and some of them lose sleep over it. I don't, but.
Did you used to?
Maybe like the first few months of becoming an atheist, but no, like once you put yourself in the situation of an Orthodox Jew, let's say 3,000 years ago, and ask yourself the question, do you think these Orthodox Jews worried about hell if they were on their deathbed? And once you realize the answer is no, then you realize, oh, the good news of the gospel seems to coincide with the bad news of hell. Is that a coincidence? I think not. You kind of realize this whole concept of hell, and you start looking into it. What does it exactly mean? And You start looking into the Babylonians and all this. It's like, it's, it's probably all made up.
Yeah. Most likely explanation is that it's not real. That was kind of the conclusion you came to. Interesting. Well, this is a show about examining people's beliefs. So if you want to talk to Doug, if you want to talk to me, or if you have a belief you want to examine, go ahead and call the number. Again, our lines are still open. We actually don't have any callers on right now, but that's okay because I'd like to try a little segment with you, Doug. And you're our first test dummy for this little experiment I have for you.
Oh, good.
I'm calling this the belief of the week. Okay? So the name of the game is I'm going to list a belief to you. And first, I'd like you to tell me if you think it's real or not, or if you think there's another explanation for it, and what would convince you, what would be the criteria to convince you that this belief could be true?
Can I put my answers in the envelope first?
Yeah, no. We're no James Randi ESP stuff like that. We're just kind of doing.
It's actually Johnny Carson, but you're too young.
Oh, Johnny. Yeah, that's true. I'm too young to know anything really. So first, I want to talk to you about speaking in tongues.
Okay.
So this is something you've talked about before on your channel, and I believe your position is you think it's a psychosocial phenomenon, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But not evidence of the Holy Spirit.
No, of course not.
Okay. So what would convince you that speaking in tongues was actually evidence of the Holy Spirit, or at least a byproduct of something supernatural?
If the utterance of the tongues gave a solution to some theorem that scientists have been working on for the last 100 years and haven't solved yet, maybe that would give me a little, maybe there's some supernatural backing behind this utterance. And again,
that's a pretty high set of criteria. So
I don't lower my standards just for a deity.
I see. So, wow. Okay. So it has to solve a theorem. I'm not even sure what that would even look like. So you're kind of saying it has to solve some sort of a hole in our understanding of how the world works, basically. Is that a good way to sum it up?
Yeah. Or even made some very, very specific prediction. That, let's say, 3 years from now, the winning lottery ticket numbers, 10-digit number or something. But even then, that's not quite as good as the theorem, I think, that's been trying to be unsolved for like 100 years. But yeah, something very specific that would make me go, wow. It would have to be, or maybe here's another one. This is one I always give. If the utterance of the tongues in front of an amputee actually got his limb back. So here you got an amputee, and the person who's about to speak in tongues, I'm going to say a word that will cause this limb to come back in Jesus' name, and starts in tongues. And while the tongues are going, within like 10 seconds of the tongues, the new arm appears. That would increase my confidence a little bit, or actually a lot.
Okay. Interesting. Let's try another belief. So somebody who comes up to you and says, Doug, you're still a Christian. I believe it. I see it in you. There's something about you that, that screams that the Holy Spirit is still in you and God still wants to be like a part of your life. Okay. So that's kind of a lot of different things there. But this idea that you are still a Christian in some capacity, that there's still some sort of influence in you. What criteria would it take for you to believe that that's true? Assuming that you don't believe that's true. I'm assuming that you don't. But
no, I don't believe that's true. But I would say to that person, you could be right. Maybe I am a Christian. I don't believe. Maybe guys like Cy Ten Bruggencate is right and I'm suppressing. But how do I change? How do I stop the suppression? How do I realize that I'm actually am that Christian that you think I am? Again, it would come down to me having to raise my confidence in the core propositions that Jesus rose from the dead is true and so forth, for me to believe that it's a Christian, that I'm a Christian. I would have to believe that Christianity in itself is true to begin with.
Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah.
There's a backlog of beliefs that have to go beforehand. I see. So like, what would be
I totally understand why when Christians look at me, they see the love of Jesus because, I'm just such a nice guy and, I look like I could be their youth pastor at their church. And
well, this is okay. Well, the reason why I bring this specific question up actually is because you actually asked me this one time and I thought I gave a pretty good answer at the time. I don't remember what I said, but I realized I had never heard anyone say that to me. And usually it's because it's always been the opposite. Even in my Christian circles, there have been people who have said, oh, you look like you have a spirit of like doubting in you, that there's something else that's trying to like prevent you from being a good Christian. So it's kind of like the other way around, if that makes sense. Like I was a Christian and there was something internally trying to change that. Whereas now you're an atheist and there's something Christian internally that's trying to change that. But
you know why that is? It's because guys like you and me, I think, look genuinely happy. And if you're someone who believes that after you die, you're just worm food, like, what gives you the right to be happy? What gives you this reason to wake up in the morning and do stuff? And I think that throws a lot of believers in for a loop. They don't know what to make of it. That when they see me, like, I genuinely want to wake up in the morning and do stuff and learn stuff and see my kids and play with my kids and teach with my kids and so forth. So yeah, I think there's this conception out there that if you leave Christianity, you lose all meaning, all hope, all purpose. And if they want to say, in the ultimate sense, if this God exists, then I'll grant that to them. Yeah, sure, you're right. If there is no God, all that ultimate stuff is gone. But who cares? I still have meaning, hope, and purpose in my life, and I'm not a nihilist. I'm happy. I love life, and so forth. So
I think you're right. I think it's almost like a sense of denial. Like, oh, you can't actually be an atheist. There's no way. You or at least live the life that you do. This actually happened to me a few weeks ago. It wasn't exactly a coworker of mine, but it was somebody who worked in the same building who I had a pretty good relationship with. I've known him for about half a year now. And I was telling him about me doing this show and stuff. And I mentioned that it was like an atheist show. And he was like, oh, you're an atheist. And I was like, oh, yeah. That's kind of what I am. And he was like, you are just such a, I always thought you were so thoughtful and like pretty much like a good guy. I guess I just kind of just assumed you were a Christian. And he added the caveat, well, I realized maybe that's kind of offensive to like you guys and stuff, but like that was like my honest thought. And I was like, yeah, I mean, that's kind of like why I do what I do so that I can show people that like we're just okay people and we're just like everybody else. So it's kind of interesting.
It's that whole stigma. Like I had a friend, when was it? Maybe a few months ago. He was shocked when he knew I had a channel and he knew I didn't believe. He knew I wasn't a Christian, but he heard me say that I was an atheist and he was shocked. Like, whoa, Doug, how did you go from being a non-Christian to calling yourself an atheist? Like, this is big. Like, no, it's not big. It's just, I don't believe in any gods. Like, it's nothing more than that. And, but there's this stigma out there that this word atheist means, I don't know what they're thinking, that maybe you're going to cheat on your taxes more. You're going to lie more. You're going to cheat more. You're going to, all these things.
You're hateful. You have some hateful spirit in you. I think that's what I heard a lot.
Yeah, you're angry. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's a shocker because like people just, I don't know, they don't expect it. So that's interesting. So do you want me to broadcast this on my channel too, in case
somebody there wants to call?
What do you think, Mark? Getting word from... Okay, yeah, we have the green light to go ahead and do that.
Okay.
That would be fun. Yeah, because we are struggling with some calls, guys. I'm disappointed because every single show... No, it's not your fault. We kind of started a little late today. But every single show I've done, I've consistently have callers. And this is the first one where I haven't had callers. So
Nobody wants to talk to PineCreek.
Nobody? No? Yeah, that's right. You're like a deterrent. It's amazing. But yeah, so I want to keep kind of playing this game with you because I find it interesting the criteria by which people will accept or not accept certain beliefs. And remarkably so, I find that non-believers such as us are much more consistent on this, which I think is really interesting. Not to say that religious people or people who hold other beliefs can't be consistent, but I don't know if it's because we're all reading the same material and we're all just in the same circle, so we kind of have the same answers. But there is a noticeable similarity with everything that we're doing. So it's interesting. So let's talk about... Oh, it looks like we actually have a caller online. Oh, they're on the handset right now, so we'll get to talk to them in a sec. But real quickly, gosh, I only had those two. I should have thought some more. Okay, so healing. That's an interesting one. Somebody tells you that, look, the reason why I know that God is real is because I witnessed somebody in my life get healed. They had this tumor that went away, and it was in a time of crisis in my life, and I found a lot of peace by praying through God, and through prayer, suddenly this tumor that was in my grandmother went away. What would be the first kind of questions you would ask to somebody like that?
I would ask them, well, I'm happy to hear that the tumor went away. I would ask them, do the doctors say what chance there is of that tumor going away on its own? And hopefully it can give you an answer. Maybe it's only 1%. Mm-hmm. And then ask them, well, what's 1% times the population of all the people with that type of cancer in the world? Like, what does that actually come out to? And that's going to be a huge number. And so then I would ask, okay, how do we figure out, that's a great way to phrase it. How do you figure out if your God actually is the cause of this, or that it was something completely natural that all the other people just went through, based on statistics of how many people go through remission with this type of cancer? And so another way to look at it, when it comes to prayer and miracles and so forth, the way I put it is I encourage Christians to take out their pen, take out a piece of paper, and when they're asking for intercessory prayer, prayers for other people, especially those who are sick, write on a piece of paper what the probability is of that coming true without prayer at all. And see what they say and see what they write. So if statistics say that people with a certain type of cancer, there's 10% chance of remission, basically they are admitting to themselves that 10% of the time, whether you pray or not, that cancer is going to go away or it's going to be in remission.
Okay. What if there's a Christian that says, oh, but Doug, God is in control of all events, whether you pray to him or not. He predestines everything.
I would quote the movies The Incredibles. If everybody's incredible, then no one is. If God controls everything, then really does he control anything? At that point, you're kind of just, okay. And you smile and you slowly back away.
Well, because, that's a real belief that people do have that, I think I kind of thought about this as well. Like, God's not just going to, abandon you just because you didn't pray to him. Like, he can still have influence over events in your life. But, maybe the trajectory of your life might change because you didn't do things a certain way. I don't know. I think that was kind of the mindset that I had. So that kind of adds an interesting dimension to this event probability thing that we're talking about. Because if we do have a God that can do anything, then really anything is kind of possible at any time, right?
Yeah, and you can also ask questions like, couldn't the God have prevented the cancer in the first place? Why wait for the remission to say, praise the Lord? And a lot of Christians do think that way and will say, praise the Lord, I don't have cancer today. Maybe I was going to if I wouldn't have prayed. But then you have like the butterfly effect, the fact that someone was prayed for and then the cancer went away. What's the chain of events that changed the course of history for everybody else? And it's a real problem when you start really thinking deeply about a God that intervenes with his creation and on certain things and not others. And and then you got guys Christians who believe that, no matter what, God has planned every single thing. And every single thing will come to pass, because if it doesn't, then God knew wrong. And so there are Christians out there like that.
Yeah, it gets really weird pretty fast, but